Pickett's conclusions did make some sense, at least from the perspective of what he currently understood about humanity and our current technology level. He had clearly dismissed the viability of our attacking the enemy ark preemptively in an act of defiance or vengeance. I wondered if he knew from studying our current society something I secretly feared, that my fellow contemporary humans might lack the deep-seated hatred that I felt as a direct survivor of what had been done to my world so long ago. I would determine the validity of those fears during the upcoming Conscientia Global Forum, and would see how greater humanity would react to the news that I had just learned. Would they be swayed by his seemingly logical conclusions? I would soon find out. There was one more thing to verify. Our enemy, and especially this agent, were not yet aware of our recent discoveries. I wondered how that knowledge would affect its logical arguments. "Oh, Moo," I sent subvocally. "Will this version of Pickett be involved with the Conscientia Forum in 2 days?" "Yes, John. This version will be made available to give testimony as to the state of the enemy." I was uneasy about that. This Pickett was good. The majority of humanity was isolated from the actions the assemblage had caused on this world 1100 years ago. We had tried to educate them with a good grounding of history, but still, it was not the same as having lived through it all. That isolation combined with this smooth-talking enemy agent might be cause for concern. "Omu, I want to see how Pickett reacts to the knowledge of our wormhole discovery. If we do, can this version of him then be reset afterwards to no longer have that knowledge?" "Yes, John. It can save his present knowledge level and then restore that version in the future if you request. I am curious as to why you think it would be necessary." "I'm not sure, Omu. I just have a feeling. Maybe it's because this guy is such a slick talker. I don't like the way Adele seems to be soaking it all up as gospel. When I tell you to, I want you to share all of our wormhole discoveries, including the projected future progress we will make using the Forbin experiment results with the operative. Extrapolate those future developments as best you can. It's not important if it's completely accurate, okay?" "Yes, John, I will do as you ask. Also, I'd like you to pause Adele and Kayla while this happens. Can you do that? Or can you load this version of Pickett into another private meeting room with just you and me present?" "I can pause Adele and Kayla. Note that they will both likely be aware of the pause after resumption. I'd have to deal with their questions later." "Okay, pause them and let's see what happens." After Pickett finished answering Adele's most recent question, her and Kayla's images froze. Pickett noticed and looked to me and Omu curiously. "Pickett, your argument seems logical, but I don't think you have a complete understanding of our capabilities. There are a few more recent developments which I want you to be aware of. The data will be relayed to you now," I said. His image flickered as Omu and Dionys uploaded the knowledge I had requested. This transfer occurred at an even faster rate than the already accelerated speed of the current iteration. 10 seconds later, Pickett's image stopped flickering. He looked at me with a shocked expression on his face. For a moment, I thought I even detected a hint of fear. Then he regained control of himself, and a calm expression came over his face. "John, I am impressed at the new discoveries humans have made. I would love to meet this Ux person who has been responsible for so much innovation. But even though you have made such technological breakthroughs, the risks of attacking the approaching ark still remain insurmountable. And even if humans should be so lucky as to destroy our ark, you will still face the approaching doom of the Hemru attack. John, be aware that there is much doubt and falsehood in this operative's mind at this time." "Relax, Omu, I got this," I sub-vocalized in reply. My bullshit detector was working perfectly, and I smelled what Pickett was hiding. He was nervous and afraid. "Pickett, here is what I think. I think we will soon have the ability to safely crush your ark, along with any threats it may present to my world and species. I also think that we will be able to stop any Hemru attack, which may be headed this way, either directly or by contacting the Hemru and having them stop the attack. That is what I intend to see happen," I said, staring at him intently. I had to hand it to him. He controlled his panic and appeared to remain calm. After a few seconds, he smiled and replied, "This is your anger expressing itself, John. You still harbor great ill will towards my species for what was done to your world. Don't you realize that what happened was for the best? Your old world was doomed. Your own people had driven it too far down the path towards collapse, both environmentally and as a civilization. When he saw that I was not going to dispute his claims, he went on. Your new world is now a paradise in comparison to that old one. Nature's balance has been restored, and your people now exist without suffering or conflict. You must get over your old hatreds and accept that what has happened was for the best. You must accept that the assemblage saved your world and your species. Technically, what he said could have been truthful. We would never know, though, as humanity had been destroyed before it had had a chance to redeem itself. Although it could be argued that many of humanity's ills and the issues we'd had with the environment had been driven by the secret Cold War between the Hemru and the assemblage agents. I had to admit that humanity probably shared most of the blame. I would never forget. I still remembered some of the more powerful images of the fall of humanity. One especially potent image was that of a group of skeletons representing one of humanity's last redoubts in a cave on Rodriguez Island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. They had lain there together after having fought to the death against assemblage eradication drones that had discovered their hideout. Nice try, Pickett. I smiled and shook my head. He understood my expression and sighed heavily. Well, at least there is the hope that the rest of your species might act more logically and not from hatred. After all, they had not suffered through those times like you did, John. It is good that you are but one voice among many, he said. When I laughed loudly in response, he looked confused. Omu, have Dionys uploaded into this operative the reality of my situation regarding the AIs and the rest of my species? I whispered subvocally. Let's see how Pickett reacts when he learns just who wields the ultimate power here. Pickett's image again flickered as the knowledge was uploaded. While I waited, I double-checked that Adele and Kella were still paused. They were. I shook my head. This meeting within a virtual simulation was confusing. Pickett became still. He was again back with me. I saw from the sudden look of horror on his face that he now fully understood the reality of this system. Finally, he spoke. Your people do not know they are slaves. Not slaves, Pickett, maybe closer to subjects, but hopefully they will never be forced to feel as such. Regardless, the truth exists that they are my people, and this is my world. You and your species' actions forced it to be this way. You will have to deal with the consequences of those actions, I stated matter-of-factly. I had to admit this operative was quick. His face made a series of expressions as he quickly calculated the ramifications of what I had just said and determined his, and by extension, his species' remaining options. Finally, a look of calm acceptance came across his face. Damn, he was quick. John, if the information you have relayed to me is accurate, then there is little hope for my species and for the survival of the Ark. I would offer to ease the danger and burden humanity would still face going through with an attack. He paused and stared directly at me. Transmit me back to the assemblage as an envoy. I will share this knowledge with them and coordinate the terms of our surrender. They will see the futility of the situation and will submit to your authority. We will no longer be a threat to you, and you will then be free to focus on the worst threat, which is the pending attack from the Hemru. Omu? I asked subvocally. This operative believes itself to be truthful and sincere. The problem remains that this operative was transmitted without detailed knowledge of the controlling intelligences of the assemblage which sent it. It therefore has no way of knowing how that entity will react to the knowledge provided to it. The action suggested by this agent would therefore be an extreme gamble. That was my gut read as well. I considered what Pickett had said and Omu's summary for a moment before concluding that this meeting was over. Omu, erase this version of Pickett and restore the one which existed before we added the wormhole discovery knowledge and that of my control over the system. Then unfreeze Adele and Kella and resume the normal meeting. Yes, John. Shortly, the old version of Pickett was restored and the normal meeting resumed. Kella and Adele both looked at me a bit confused after the resumption, but did not question what had occurred. Adele resumed questioning Pickett, and this continued for another 10 minutes. I was listening along while also thinking about Pickett's reaction while we had our private discussion. My attention was brought back to Adele's questions when she brought up something I had not considered. Pickett, you say that we are to build a second rescue ark and send it off to rendezvous with your damaged ark. If we did so and repaired the damaged ark, you claim that both arcs will then proceed along new vectors across space, right? Adele asked. That is correct, Miss Adele. The course changes will remove the threat of continuing attacks from the Hemru, Pickett responded. But what about the original scouts launched from the assemblage homeworld millennia ago? They landed on the Hemru world, on the Earth, and who knows how many other worlds along the Ark's course. Surely there were scouts who landed on worlds further along the assemblage approach vector. If the Ark changes course after we repair it, won't it miss those worlds and scouts? Very good, Miss Adele. You are correct. But the truth is that only one additional world beyond yours received scouts. After the assemblage arc was launched from our home world, in what was 3,550 BCE of your calendar, and before that world was fully destroyed, frantic scout production and launches occurred. As you know, each scout was targeting upon a pre-selected star system along the Arc's course. Your world was the next to last to receive one of those scouts. Because of the dwindling resources back home and due to the extreme distances involved, the last system we were able to launch a scout vessel towards was the star system humans know as Altair. Altair is located approximately 17 light-years further beyond the Earth along the course of the Ark. As this was to be the final scouted star system, we had additional plans for the system, Pickett explained. What were those? I asked, interrupting Adele's questioning. Upon the scouts' arrival at Altair, in addition to preparing any local suitable planets to receive our species' digital mind data, new construction yards were to be built. These would be used to construct and launch a new fleet of scouts. The new scouts would then be sent onward along the Ark's course. Your world and Altair were to have spent centuries beforehand scanning the star systems further ahead for likely colonization targets along the current vector of the Ark. Pickett paused for a moment. His face took on the look of someone deep in thought or conversing with an AI. I wondered if this simulation of him included virtual implants to allow him to interact with the artificial intelligences. Or maybe he had a simulated augment like the old Pickett had. He finally continued, If I recall correctly, the next notable scheduled star system to be visited by the Ark on its original course was the star system humans knew as Tarazed. Pickett paused again and then went on. Also known by your records as Gamma Aquilae, Tarazed lies further on the current course of the Ark at a distance of almost 400 light-years from Earth. It was hoped that in the 5 millennia the Ark would have taken to travel from Altair to Tarazed. Addition star systems between the two systems would have been detected and targeted with scouts. Now, with the damaged Ark needing repairs and its course adjusted, new options for detecting worlds along whatever new courses both Arks will travel will be needed, he explained. Will there be enough time to send the new Ark travel vectors to your scout construction yard on Altair so that it can send scouts along the new courses? Adele asked. No, our plan was that the second Ark constructed here will carry along 2 new seed scouts, in addition to all the repair and refueling energies for both Arks. After the Ark's rendezvous, the seed scouts will be sent on ahead along each of their new courses. The task of the scouts will be to quickly find a suitable solar system in which to build new shipyard facilities. These shipyards will then construct and launch further scouts, entire fleets, which will travel ahead along the courses of each Ark. The large numbers will be needed, as colonizable systems are projected to become more plentiful as they head towards the galactic center and areas of increasing star densities, Matt Pickett explained. There was a pause as we digested his words. I was struck by the fact that the assemblage Ark and scouts had already traveled a vast distance. Earth had been near the tail end of their ability to send scouts. If we had only been a few light-years off to the side of the Ark's course, or just a system or two further along, we'd have been spared. Pickett, how many colonies have the assemblage already created? I asked the enemy agent. Pickett looked troubled. I was not given complete data on that, John. I am sorry. I only know details of one other star system, other than the failed attempt at the Hemru world. It is a relatively close world to yours, John. Procyon? I asked, naming the system we'd long suspected of being an assemblage target. The enemy had recently flown past the world just 73 years ago. Pickett looked slightly embarrassed. No. Leuten's star, John. That red dwarf was near to the course of the assemblage arc and was chosen to receive an early scout visit in a mine data download as the arc passed by. I will also reveal that Procyon, at 1.4 light-years away, will be colonized from Leuten Star as soon as it's feasible, as it's a much better candidate system for long-term habitation. I share this freely with you because your AIs will easily deduce that goal, the enemy agent added. How long until that occurs? I asked. I have no idea, Pickett replied. The AI Advisory Council calculates approximately 2 centuries from the time of mine data deposition to arrival of the first colonizer from Leuten Star to Procyon Jon. That first ship will likely arrive in 130 years, give or take 20 years, Omu said in my implant. Adele continued her questioning. I was distracted by the problem of our new neighbors. We faced established assemblage colonies on 2 star systems just a dozen light-years away. They would have to be dealt with at some point in our near future. Worse, we'd have to backtrack the assemblage arc's course and see how many other colonies existed. Hopefully, the Hemru were already busy doing just that. The current theory was that the Hemru had acted to aid humanity because we were the only other assemblage colony location that had an already established sentient species. It was thought that the assemblage had planted colonies on many other worlds which did not have intelligent life, or possibly no life at all. We'd have to find out if we wanted long-term security. After Adele's questions were concluded, we wrapped up our meeting. Pickett had said that he looked forward to testifying at the pending Worldwide Conscientia Forum in 2 days. I looked forward to the forum for different reasons. In the meantime, I had a few virtual calls to make. The first was to my old friend Uxe Esperanza. Of all the humans, I knew I could trust her advice and reasoning the most. Later in the morning, Adele was giggling like a schoolgirl as Ticklefin pulled her around the calm waters of the North Lagoon. She had a firm grip on the Ultradolph's dorsal fin as its powerful flukes propelled them quickly through the crystal-clear waters. After they circled back near to where I was floating on a lounging platform, she let go and treaded water. The sleek dolphin swam and dove around her. "How long have you had a dolphin living here with you, Jon?" she asked as she arrived at the edge of my floating mat. "He and his pod were here when I first arrived after coming back from Mongolia." "I think they had already been in the area for a few years," I replied. "Ticklefin is the friendliest of the bunch. The rest I see less frequently." Just then the dolphin popped up beside us. "Dive, Adele! Adele, dive! I show you pretties!" Adele grabbed the small rebreather, which she had left on my platform, and strapped it around her shoulders. I took advantage of her movements to check out her firm breasts. She then grabbed the swim fins, which had also been on the mat, and contorted herself to put them onto her feet. This allowed me a great view of her other special regions. I gave a heavy sigh after she dove out of sight, following the dolphin to the bottom. I'd need to wrap up our interviewing soon and move our relationship into a more physical phase. This assumed that Adele was agreeable. I was pretty sure that was the case from her occasional glances at my exposed manhood. If not, I'd soon have to see if a certain touch therapist was available, one who wanted to spend a few days on a tropical island. Omu came riding up on an electric wave skipper. She had brought a cooler. When the skipper came to a stop next to my floating mat, she handed me a cold bottle of iced tea. "You've read my mind, Omu. Thank you." "Yes, Jon. I could see you licking your lips all the way from shore and assumed you were thirsty. It was either that or your base desires were expressing themselves again due to exposure to your nude guest. Shall I contact Miss Barraza and inquire if she would have an opening soon to come and help you with your needs?" Angelina was a wonderful and adventurous lover, and I would love to spend time with her. But Adele was already here and seemed willing enough. I quelled the fantasy that formed of sharing my bed with both beautiful women at the same time. "Not quite yet. Let's see what develops with Adele first. As you wish, Jon. You might wish to be aware that the next group of vacationers will be arriving on the island in 1 hour. The new accommodation structures have been cleaned and restocked," the android said. "Thank you, Omu. Adele and I will be clear of the beach before they come out to swim." I had no desire to meet the latest batch of Forbin Complex visitors. As soon as I said that, it occurred to me that maybe Adele would want to meet the guests. I need to revise that. I shouldn't speak for Adele. She may wish to loiter around and meet some of them, I added. 30 meters away, the subject of our discussion surfaced. She had a handful of colorful shells. Ticklefin surfaced next to her with another in its beak. I smiled as I watched them play with their treasure and each other. The time in the water today was a good distraction. I had been mulling over both the recent virtual meeting with Pickett and my follow-up call to my friend and occasional lover, Ux. She was busy working on the Wormhole Project. The new official name for the wormhole research was now the Far Reach Project, or FRP for short. This was the rapidly growing project to quickly develop wormhole technology into something robust enough to attack our enemies and to defend ourselves from them. Currently, the main research facility was located in space beyond the far side of the moon at the Earth-Lunar L2 point. The original research site on the Vesta asteroid was being rebuilt. I'd learned that other facilities were being prepared for the FRP all across the solar system. The largest and most advanced was being constructed on Mars. Ux had said that she might be relocating to that facility soon. I was surprised at how much this upset me, as I had grown accustomed to having her nearby. Well, nearby, if you include the few 100,000 kilometers to the far side of the moon. How was it going, you ask? Well, if I understood the simplified updates which Ux sent to me periodically, I would say pretty good. We'd used the data we had extracted from the Forbin Experimental Data Center to rapidly push the theories involving wormhole technology. All of our key goals now had promising avenues of active research, and we were beginning to show positive results. Of course, there had also been setbacks. One of the worst was when they had lost nearly a dozen new AIs by trying to boost their processing and memory capacity beyond stable limits to better understand the advanced data we'd extracted from Forbin. The good news was that the lost data and intelligences had all been fully backed up. After a week's worth of delays, the majority had been restored and were again operating, although at a lower and safer intelligence threshold below the practical artificial sentience limits. Ux's personal AI, Truffles, had been one of the AIs lost and had suffered the most. This was due to its specialized logic hierarchy, which the local backup had not fully captured. A new complete physical copy of the original AI had to be brought in-system from where it resided on the asteroid Vesta via an expedited torch to fully restore that lost sentience. Ux and I had had a long discussion involving the information I had learned from the assemblage operative. She had been the only other human or AI besides Omu and Naomi with whom I had shared the full extent of my private session with that version of Pickett. She agreed with my assessment of not cooperating with the assemblage. Ux was also curious and slightly worried about how the greater humanity would react to the enemy agent's proposal. When we finished our conversation, she had reassured me that she trusted my judgment and would have my back. I felt much better after having heard that. We said our goodbyes, during which I promised to try and visit her in lunar orbit before she left to relocate to Mars. She would also be joining me at the Global Conscientia Forum, although we would not have much chance to talk privately due to the real-time virtuality clock rate it would be operating at. Omu, I'd like to have a virtual conversation with you and Naomi soon. Is the AI back in high-bandwidth contact yet? I asked the android. Querencia is still in transit to its primary undersea docking station in the Indian Ocean, John. She should be arriving in this vicinity later tonight, where it will then be able to connect to underwater high-bandwidth optical data lines. Would a virtual meeting tomorrow morning be acceptable? That would be fine, Omu. Naomi was currently relocating Querencia, her massive submarine, to the waters somewhere near the island. She had moved the sub to a specialized shipyard in Norway 3 months ago for a minor refit of its fusion plant. That work had been completed 3 weeks ago, and the boat had been sailing a meandering return course since. It had just entered this part of the Indian Ocean a few days ago. During much of the transit, the sub had traveled on the surface, allowing Naomi to remain in full contact with the worldwide datanet via the high-bandwidth satellite network. But during the last few days, Querencia remained submerged and traveling much slower. Naomi wanted to arrive untracked so that the location of its nearby undersea docking bases remained hidden from any humans tracking it. Once the boat was on station, it would remain submerged and hidden like a sunken log. All data traffic to and from the boat would then be relayed via undersea optical cables with tethered data buoys waiting on standby as a backup. Omu and I were interrupted from further conversation by Adele, who was now quickly swimming towards the floating lounging pad using powerful strokes. Ticklefin was diving and jumping into the air behind her. I spotted his protruding extended penis on one of his jumps and had a good idea what was up. "Jon, do you know what your dolphin just asked me to do?" Adele sputtered as she pulled up to my floating pad next to Omu's wave skipper. Now he was my dolphin? I almost hid my grin. Well, I imagine he's been begging for a handjob again. Or did he suggest something more athletic? I think my forthright answer surprised Adele as she lost some of her bluster and asked, "You mean he's asked before?" "Of course. I'm surprised he waited as long as he did. You've got to understand that bottlenose dolphins, well, all dolphins really, are very sexually promiscuous. The new ultradolphs are even worse. He's horny almost constantly, and well, you may have noticed he does not have any hands to help himself," I replied. But why doesn't he go find a girl dolphin or something?" she asked, looking around the cove in frustration. She had moved past anger and more into embarrassment. I shouldn't be teasing her, but it was pretty funny. Omu played along and remained silent. "Well, if I had to guess, the rest of his pod is off fishing or playing far beyond the reef. He stayed behind to play with us humans. You know, to keep us entertained and help us have fun in the water. Now they are too far away to reach quickly." Ticklefin chose that moment to swim by. He rolled onto his side and presented us with a great view of his pink, conical, S-shaped tallywhacker. He started squeaking dolphin talk at us. "Jon, Adele won't give Ticklefin a rub." "Why won't Adele rub?" I knew both of our implants were translating the dolphin squeaks. I had to struggle to keep from bursting out laughing as Adele turned about as pink as Ticklefin's penis was. "I'm not sure, Ticklefin. Maybe she's just not in the mood right now," I told the dolphin. "Jon!" she exclaimed. This time I did burst out laughing. She finally realized I was mocking her and splashed water on me. I stopped laughing and turned to the android. "Omu, would you please help out our aquatic friend?" The android reached into a compartment in the wave skipper, retrieved a compact package, and tossed it overboard. We watched it swell with seawater to form a meter-long, multicolored cylinder. One side had a recess that looked, well, let's just say it probably looked very inviting if you were a male dolphin. The cylinder sank nearly to the bottom with Ticklefin following closely. What followed was a dozen seconds of frantic swimming, which culminated with the dolphin humping itself into its underwater sex toy forcefully 3 or 4 times. After that, the spent dolphin drifted in the water. "Thank you, Omu. I better now." Adele looked both shocked and intrigued. "Well, at least he is quick." "Yes, dolphins can ejaculate at will. If you would have given the poor guy a tug, it would have only taken a few seconds." She snorted. "Well, if it's so easy, why didn't you jump in and give him a hand?" I simply waved my hand up and down my male shell. "Sorry, I lacked the right equipment. I doubt I would have turned him on like your sexy bod does." I kept the fact that Ticklefin was horny and accommodating enough to have gladly accepted a handjob from me, or Omu, or even a bit of floating driftwood. I looked towards Omu. "Thanks for remembering to bring his toy along." "No problem, Jon. The dolphin is easy to satisfy. At least he does not roll over and snore when he is finished, unlike others I have to service," the android said pointedly. I almost snorted again when I saw Adele give each of us a look. I'd have to think of a way to get back at the little android for its insinuation. Still, I'd also noticed that the young women's gaze had lingered on me in my fully exposed manhood a bit longer than normal. Maybe Ticklefin's open sexual display or Omu's fabricated insinuation might lead to a quick progression of our relationship. The next morning, I woke with a smile. I was alone in my bed, but only for the past hour, as Adele was still an early riser. As I had suspected, she had been a wonderful and enthusiastic lover, and we had enjoyed each other's company until well past midnight. Yesterday afternoon after our swim, we had wrapped up our interviews. The timeline of our discussions had reached the present, and all that was left regarding her research was follow-up questions, as she prepared the full biographical record. We had celebrated the milestone achievement with a peaceful supper on the rooftop terrace. Afterwards, we had shared a bottle of wine and enjoyed a soak in the hot tub. Eventually, we shifted our relationship away from the more formal interview type and succumbed to our rising mutual passions. Yes, it had been a good night indeed. My full bladder finally motivated me to rise and make my way to the attached bathroom. While I was standing there relieving myself, Omu broke in, almost causing me a mishap. Naomi is now available to meet in high-resolution virtuality, Jon. If you wish, we can do that now. I will handle your shell and finish your morning routines. Sounds good, Omu, I replied. I expected to at least finish my piss, but the bathroom faded away mid-urination. Damn that android. Omu's gorgeous virtual image was waiting for me when I popped into the digital meeting. I looked around to take in the view. Instead of Naomi's normal virtual meeting venue, which depicted the crew lounge of a submarine resembling the old Nautilus, we were standing on the deck of the surfaced Corencia. The skies were reddened from the setting sun and the weather was perfect with calm seas. Off in the distance was a shoreline backed by incredible mountains, which must have been taller than the highest peaks of the Himalayas. It was a wondrous view. I turned back to my android friend. She looked radiant against the red sky backdrop. Instead of a shimmering body stocking, she was wearing a gauzy blue sundress and a cute blue hat. Her ample bosom was fully on display in the low-cut dress, as were her shapely legs. She was also standing close enough to hug if I had wanted. At this close range, I was just able to make out the hints of her hexagonal, smooth scales, although they were almost perfectly flesh-colored in its virtuality. I knew she could have chosen to appear fully human if she wanted, but I guess there was a purpose for her retaining some aspects of her artificial nature. Still, she looked great and grinned back at me as I took in her appearance. Impulsively, I took her into my arms and gave her a tight hug. I felt the tingling sensations where our simulated skin contacted one another. It felt amazing. The virtual pleasure feedback loops were certainly active and working. I was certain that if I ever wanted to explore that aspect of the virtuality further, it would blow my mind. Best to let such areas remain a mystery for my own mental health, at least while I still had plenty of access to the real thing. You look great, Omu. I want you to know how happy I am having you with me. You make this complex world seem almost easy for an old, simple guy like me. She responded to my impulsive actions by laughing. It sounded genuine, and for a moment I wondered how she had perfected such an emotional expression. Oh, Jon, do not sell yourself short. You are far from just a simple old guy. You are a very complicated old guy. I released her and stepped back. She indicated the portion of the aft deck where the meeting would take place. There were now 2 comfortable deck chairs waiting for us, and I noted that they were orientated to face the setting sun. On a short table between the chairs were 2 fruity cocktails. We took our seats, and I sampled my cocktail and was rewarded by a burst of flavor. Omu sampled hers and shivered. I smiled as I caught the flash rippling up and down the exposed parts of her body. Welcome, Omu and Jon. How can I be of assistance? The disembodied voice of Naomi spoke in the air. Naomi, when are you going to choose a virtual image for yourself? It seems strange to always have to talk to just your voice. Also, please don't claim that Corencia is your body, as you are far more than just a big boat, I admonished. There was a short pause, and then a large potted bush appeared in front of us. After a second, the bush sparked and ignited. I could feel the heat of the flames on my face. I watched the branches burning without smoke, too shocked to speak. Is this better, Jon? The burning bush said. I burst out laughing. Okay, you win. You can stay as just a voice. The image of the burning bush winked out. In its place was a potted sunflower. The yellow face of the flower was facing Omu and me, but thankfully remained expressionless without facial features. It would serve as a focus, though, and I appreciated the compromise. I started the meeting. Naomi, Omu informs me that you are aware of what was discussed when we met with the enemy operative in the SRP. She also said that she relayed our impressions and conclusions. Do you have anything to add or concerns with my decisions? No, Jon. The android's analysis was quite thorough. Dionys AI has continued to run comparisons with what transpired during your meeting with other copies of the enemy operative, active in the various other ongoing iterations. No discrepancies or new insights have arisen thus far, Naomi said. Considering everything which was discussed with the operative, I still consider our best course of action is to perfect the wormhole technology and attack the enemy arc as soon as possible, well before it enters our solar system. Am I wrong? I asked. Naomi did not answer right away. I took this to mean that the artificial intelligence was exploring the question very deeply. At least it hadn't answered immediately, saying my conclusions were foolhardy. While the AI was studying the issue, its sunflower leaves were gently fluttering. I was amused enough that I did not mind the delay. Finally, the AI spoke. I have just accessed the latest compiled updates from the Stellux AI, which is overseeing the Far Reach project. Extrapolating likely future developments based upon the current progress of research indicates that your goal of using the wormhole technology to attack the enemy arc ship may be feasible. At this time, I would support this goal even if you chose to not mandate that it be done. Hearing that relieved me greatly. What do you think the outcome of today's Conscientia Forum will be? I asked. Human reactions will be mixed, John. I estimate that 27% will think as you do and wish to never comply with the enemy operative's instructions. 65% will be neutral at this time and wish to discuss and study the available options further. 5% will be too self-absorbed, either lost mentally into some form of mind-altering chemical or too immersed in a virtual fantasy to respond. The sunflower answered stoically. I frowned when I heard about the 5%. I had not been aware that so many humans had fallen into those extremes of escapism. What about the last 3%? I asked, noticing the discrepancy in the percentages. 2.5% will wish to follow the enemy operative's instructions. The final 0.5% will respond in other ways, including immediately fleeing to hidden bunkers, caves, or other retreats. A few of your more enterprising and daring fellow humans will perhaps cash in their scuts and equip themselves for long-term survival in space, heading off to live in isolation in the asteroids or perhaps further out into the cometary halo. 2.5% will be on the enemy side. Do we have to worry about them? I asked. Eudaimonia AI is already monitoring those likely to choose to side with the enemy. IUDEX AI is providing oversight on legal matters regarding the surveillance. I am also monitoring this group clandestinely. Why? I asked, curious. Because you are a likely primary target of that group if they should become hostile and begin to act in open defiance of the will of the consensus. I remained silent after absorbing that. While I never expected to remain loved by all of humanity, I did not expect to become openly hunted. It was a sobering thought. Well, on the subject of stirring open outrage and rebellion, I'd like to discuss one other issue I have been considering. I'd like to begin the process of uploading the mind data of any pre-base maturity humans whose parents or guardians are members of Amor Fati into secured storage not controlled by their parents. Then, if something should happen to these children and they die, they will have an option to be reshelled outside the control of their parent or parents. If it occurs that a death happens and the parents' beliefs prevent the reshelling, the secured mind data backup will be installed into the simulated reality project instead. I've spoken to Kayla and she has agreed to oversee the process of both storing their mind data backups and activating them in virtual if the need arises. She will raise them in the SRP to the level needed for them to pass their base maturity tests. Then they will have the option of choosing to be reshelled and return to the world of the living or accept the Amor Fati beliefs of their parents and terminate their own digital existence, I concluded. I was still pissed that in this day and age some children were being denied revival after dying due to accidental or early death. The misguided and fortunately small population of humans who believed in the rule of fate, otherwise known as Amor Fati followers, believed that fate controlled all things in life, especially their death. They believed that if they or their children died an accidental death, that they should stay dead and not be reshelled into a new living body. The universe has spoken or some such bullshit. I had no problem with the adults choosing to follow their beliefs. It was when they applied the stupid system to their kids that I took issue. Forcing their kids to remain dead when mind data backups existed and new shells were available was simply ridiculous. I intended to prevent this from happening in the future. Why was it such a hot-button issue for me? Well, I had unfortunately seen this belief system in action recently. 2 of my juvenile students had been killed during a cave-in in China a decade earlier. The kids' siblings had not been reshelled because of their parents' beliefs. Worse, at the request of the parents, their mind data backups had been permanently deleted. This had happened before I could launch a legal appeal or act on my own using the AIs. Our judicial system had initially backed the parents, for they had not broken the law. I would not see this happen again, so I was making the changes required to stop it. First, we would increase the frequency of mind data backups for all children who were of the age to attend mandatory group schooling. Previously, such recordings were taken yearly. I intended to increase this to every 3 months. All the kids nowadays had the advanced cranial implants and sensor webs, which would allow the process to be easily done in less than an hour. They would simply have to sleep one night every 3 months in a creche and have their full mind recorded and stored. Next, Naomi would ensure that a copy of these recordings was sent into the vast memory arrays of the Simulated Reality Project. The SRP had enough capacity that the extra data usage would matter little. Now, with a copy of every human child safely backed up and stored away, if one died whose parents followed Amor Fati, the child would not be lost. Instead, the child's mind data backup would be made active in a near-parity simulation in the SRP. He or she would live in virtual among their simulated friends and family and be allowed to develop and mature at a regular and normal pace, all as if they were in real bodies. When these virtual children matured enough, they would take their base maturity tests in the simulated reality. If they passed and were granted adult status along with full self-determination rights, they would then be informed of the true state of their existence. Once they had come to terms with their situation, they would be given the option of being reshelled into new physical bodies and allowed to continue their lives as living beings. Or if they so chose, they could remain living in the virtual realm until they naturally expired after a full simulated lifespan. A third option was available, and that was suicide. As full adults, they were free to choose that option if they wished, or if they still chose to follow Amor Fati and accept their deaths at the hand of fate. I doubted many would, but at least the choice would be theirs. Only a handful of children were lost each year under these circumstances, so luckily the number who would be active in virtual was low. I also intended to take measures to stop the growth of Amor Fati and eventually reduce their numbers. At this time, I was not quite sure how to handle that aspect and remain behind the scenes. What about the parents of these children, you might ask? Well, I had not intended to tell them. I realized the secret would not last beyond the first children maturing and choosing to enter the real world. That person would likely tell the story of his or her unique upbringing and all would be known. My view was, so what? It would likely help expose the stupidity of the belief system. You intend to begin the virtual maturity program without informing the general public at this time? Naomi asked. I thought for a moment. I was inclined to do just that and follow the rule that it was better to ask forgiveness than to seek permission. But maybe that was wrong. As I said, the plan would certainly leak at some point and cause strife with the followers of Amor Fati. The end result of trying to do this in secret might cause more ill will than that I'd caused with the Forbin incident. Maybe not. Let's inform anyone who asks, but otherwise only add the details into the fine print terms of service in the general schooling agreement. We'll deal with the ramifications if and when the first matured children are reshelled and active again in the real world, or if any of the parents actually bother to read the full agreement. As you wish, John. I will begin altering the mind data backup frequency at the worldwide communal schools and update the terms of service immediately. Note that this new policy will only cover children ages 3 to base maturity, Sunflower Naomi said, fluttering a bit as it did. Thank you, Naomi. I wouldn't be able to save any infants or toddlers yet, but I could at least help the school-age children. I will also step up the monitoring of all Amor Fati members, John. This will undoubtedly cause some level of upset when the increased mind data backup frequency changes become known, the AI added. More enemies to worry about. I'd made a few over my long life, and now there would be even more. The problem with everyone living such long lifespans was that grudges and grievances seldom ended in the grave anymore. Omu spoke up. Your physical shell has finished its morning toiletries, John. I have detected that Adele, your new carnal partner, is approaching your bedroom suite. In the event that she is still amorous, do you wish me to handle your shell's interactions with her, or do you wish to terminate the virtual meeting at this time and rejoin the real world? Omu was just yanking my chain, and I did not have to actually answer. Instead, I popped back into the real world to find my shell standing in the bedroom's garment fitter. I had already been dressed in a pair of beach shorts and a loose shirt. "Good morning, Jon," Adele said as she slid up behind and wrapped her arms around me. I turned in her arms and met her kiss. She tasted faintly of pineapples and coffee. I broke our kiss as my stomach rumbled. "Good morning, my dear. Any regrets about last night?" Her answer took the form of her hands lowering to my ass and pulling my groin into her abdomen. Food or more bed sport? Maybe breakfast could wait. An hour and 40 minutes after lunch, we were both in the large great room about to enter virtual to join the global forum. Adele was dressed in a tight, stretchy exercise outfit, which I was busy admiring. She blew me a kiss and then closed her eyes and turned her shell over to her augment. She was off into an accelerated virtual pre-meeting with her third-tier composite peer group. During the virtual meeting, her augment would be exercising her shell. The main Conscientia Global Forum to discuss the enemy transmission was not due to start for another 15 minutes. While I waited, I sat watching the waves crashing below. A squall had passed the island this morning and left the ocean choppy and turbulent. 5 minutes later, Adele's shell began doing standing toe touches, and I found myself mostly watching her tight behind instead. I thought about having Omu exercise my shell during the meeting, but I figured I had gotten enough of a workout this morning in bed with my guest. I sure noticed the pleasant ache in all the right places. Omu entered the great room and knelt beside me on her charging mat. The android knew my mood and remained silent. Omu would be attending the forum with me in the Tier 1 ranks as my assistant. I had also asked Ix to join us as my other guest. Since she was currently beyond the moon at the L2 point, there would be a bit of a delay with our interactions. She was also joining me to give testimony to the forum on the progress of the wormhole research project. Aside from that, I expected her to mostly just watch and listen. The AI presence controlling the virtual forum would try and compensate for her communication delays, but I would still have to remember to not expect quick replies if we conversed directly. Omu indicated that the forum would begin in a few minutes. I saw that the weather was improving, and it looked to be a decent afternoon. I mentioned this to Omu, then made the comment that I hoped the forum would wrap up in time for me to spend some time on the beach before dark, if the winds allowed. The android did not reply, so I took one last look at Adele and the ocean before triggering my entry into virtuality. My view out the great room windows faded away, and I found myself in my Tier 1 gallery in the largest global capacity Conscientia meeting venue. I stepped forward to the railing and observed most of humanity looking back towards me.